call to order the Development Review Commission meeting of May 5th, 2025. Admin, can you call the roll?
Yes. Chair Lindstrom.
Present.
Vice Chair Leake.
Present.
Dews.
Present.
O'Connor.
Present.
Mino.
Present.
Sangri.
Present.
And we have Kristen Bates absent this evening. And we have John Wendland.
Here.
Thank you. Are there any changes needed to the agenda before we move forward? None. So we'll move on to item number 3. I'd like to invite Councilor Wendland to share the City Council report.
Well, a lot has been happening since we saw you last a month ago. I'll give you a few highlights, since I know you have a packed agenda with so many hearings and everything else on the agenda. I've got, what, an hour? Is that what? Just kidding, just kidding. I'm very happy to let everyone know, if you haven't heard, LORAC is open. The Lake Oswego Recreation and Aquatic Center has finally opened. We had the open house, was it last weekend, last Saturday? Overwhelmingly a great project for Lake Oswego. And if you haven't had a chance, go up and see it. Just tell them you want to take a tour and somebody will take you around, or you can just walk around. The facility turned out fabulously, and I just want to tell everyone that it was a collaborative effort by so many people. It's our first relationship from an operating and financial standpoint with the school district on a project of this size. And by patching everything together that we could, we were able to come up with a really wonderful facility that will be serving the citizens of Lake Oswego, young and old, for a very long time. And the golf course is open, and I've talked to several people that have played it already and said, oh my gosh, what an improvement. Now there's only 9 holes versus 18, so that's, but it's a, the sand traps are, or the greens are great, they're challenging. The course is in great shape, so if you want to go out and it's probably the most inexpensive golf that you'll have anywhere. And there's memberships at LORAC if you do want to join. It's fairly inexpensive compared to other clubs, and there's great workout facilities, 2 pools, all kinds of classes and so on. So that was an exciting moment in the Lake Oswego community. As far as I think we had probably 300 or 400, 500 people there at the ribbon cutting ceremony. So well attended, lots of energy. Couple council issues or things that we were updated on. We had our annual police report, which is interesting. Every year we get a update on what's happening in the past year for police activity. And for the most part, all statistics are down from previous years. We are a very low crime, low issue-oriented community, but it doesn't mean that we don't have all kinds of calls. Our call center, which we take calls for actually Westland and Gladstone as well, but just for Lake Oswego calls, there's over 25,000 phone calls to our emergency and non-emergency numbers. And so people call for almost anything, including things that are not good, but things that are helpful. If you've lost your keys, call the number, and there's a good chance that you probably get them back. So, but a couple of statistics, you can go online if you want to. There's a new dashboard that they've created to have real time information as far as traffic stops and different things like that, which they're just implementing. So it's kind of in the beta stage, but they're getting that going. But overall, great news. Good. Our traffic stops, actually the report is a little bit misleading. Our traffic stops last year were lower than normal because we were down one traffic officer. So I'm sure the stats will go right back up. So watch how close you, or how fast you drive in Lake Oswego, which is another subject that we talked about in a study session. 20 is plenty, and that's the speed that other communities around us, Portland, Tigard, Eugene, a couple of others, have implemented a new speed zone for residential roads and thoroughways, and it's a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. So while I'm supportive of the general traffic safety in Lake Oswego, is it's super important, the numbers don't really tell us that we have a lot of issues, but I think it's, we're trying to emphasize people walking and exercising and bicycling in and around our residential streets, and a lot of people feel comfortable with slower traffic. So that is just a work session now. We'll have some things drawn up in the next few months, and then we'll have a hearing to find out just what the community thinks about it. Budget, we're right in the middle of the budget cycle. We do a biennium, or a 2-year biennium budget cycle. So our budgets basically are fairly predictable. We have a great revenue stream with property taxes and other general revenue items that are very consistent. And so it saves us a lot of money, time, and effort to do a budget every 2 years instead of doing the whole budget process every year. And so by doing that, doesn't mean that we don't look at the numbers all throughout the process. We're always looking at the numbers. Just gives us a planning, streamlining effect that really keeps us more concentrated on actually making sure the actual numbers are recorded correctly and putting effort into that, because our budgets are fairly consistent. We're in great shape financially. We don't overextend ourselves. We have good reserves. Because we have predictability in our budget, we know kind of what it will be, and so we generally spend up to that level. As consistent with any organization, there are far more needs than there is revenue or numbers or available money. So we're always competing on different projects or resources, and usually it comes down to staffing, of if this department needs more staffing or this department needs more staffing, that type of thing. But overall, it's pretty straightforward. We are adding quite a few positions because of LORAC, because of the new activity center with lots of lifeguards and different people that will be many of them will be part-time, but they turn out to be actually, I think it's 39 full-time equivalents to staff that. And that's going to be offset by a lot of revenue that's coming in from memberships and so on. So it's not a straight expense item. We're going to get a legislative update tomorrow at our council meeting. And I will just say that I'm following lots of different things in Salem. It's kind of like a wild card. When things kind of get done down there, things tend to fall off the list, and then all of a sudden, 5 things get passed, and you had no idea that they were even being considered. But I will say there's a consistency on, again, on housing production, and this is my political statement as a city councilor and an elected official. I would say there's more attacks on home rule, where they're trying to put blanket state policy in for communities and bypassing sort of the local control over some of the housing. It has to do with a lot of the different things that you deal with on the planning side, and the whole thing that these wonderful servants to the public are faced with every day. And we Salem seems to change the, all the marbles, and then you start to get set, and you start to get them figured out, and then they change them again. And this is like our third legislative session that they have done major changes, and it looks like they're going to still continue to do some more, I'm not going to say damage, but I'm going to say, I did, but I can say that. So it'll be interesting. I hope next time, they have until June to get their work done, and so we'll see what actually flies and then what the governor will sign. So there's still a lot of moving balls, but I'll give you an update as soon as I know things. Then the last part is boards and commissions. Obviously, you're on one of the most important commissions that we have. The DRC is very important to the operation of this city, and there's probably a couple of you that may be rolling off due to term limits. I'm not sure which ones are and which ones aren't, but it is an open process right now for all of our boards and commissions, and if you have any interest or you have friends that want to serve, tell them to get their applications in. It closes May 11th. So we have all kinds of different opportunities to get involved. And so we encourage people to continue to sign up. And again, it's people that are volunteers in the city, just like you, that are giving your time and treasure to make Lake Oswego a better community. So thank you for all you do, and that's it for my update. Yes, sir.
I noticed in the newspaper that you discussed and did approve the process of increasing our bonding limits within the city of Lake Oswego. And can you make a comment about how much of that increase is going to be left over after the expected cost of the sewage treatment plant? In other words, how much capital bonding capacity will we have above and beyond the capacity we need for the sewage treatment plant?
That's a great question. So there's two factors that you go into the bonding world, and one is to keep your bond rating as high as you possibly can. So you try to borrow it the least amount that you possibly can to cover your needs while maintaining that credit. So it's like anything else. Your credit card, you get a rating, and the less, it's kind of funny, the less credit you use, or the more capacity of credit, the better your rating is. Yet they want you to use credit so you can pay them returns. So in the big picture, there's a couple things that are playing with the water treatment plant. One is that we're getting bond capacity if we need it. There is still a chance that under the current arrangement that we're pursuing, that we may, with, not to get super complicated, but there's a WIFIA loan that we have from the federal government that looks like it's, with all the changes that are happening in Washington, it looks like that's still solid. And so having that is a different way of looking versus a bond that we would float. And so in the credit markets, it's still debt, but it's different debt. And so we have plenty of capacity in Lake Oswego to go way beyond what we would be borrowing. Now the question is, how far would we go before our A++ credit rating would be affected? We see no problem with the current sewer treatment plant. If we had to go out and finance it, it would not affect our credit rating. We still have plenty of capacity, but it's a great Sean Cross, our Director of Finance, question to get into the granular details. But Lake Oswego has always maintained an A++ credit rating, and we intend to keep that. So,
But thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Question? Do you think that Lake Oswego might follow what Portland is suggesting and waiving systems development charges for the next 3 years?
That's a great question. That's an interesting solution. I certainly think in the world of Portland, they have development problems. Lake Oswego, not so much. We have not had that push yet for that. I think we will, the council currently is more looking at deal by deal. In other words, if there's a project that needs maybe some abatement, like we're trying to get the North Anchor project finished, and we did a couple of financing techniques of trying to make it pencil out better. And so we did do, I forgot exactly what they call it. It's a tax abatement for 5 years on a formula that is available to all cities, depending upon how many floors it goes up and whether they're residential or not. And in our case, it penciled out to help the development for the multifamily housing. And it gave them a tool that would be about I forgot the number, but it wasn't a huge number, but it was enough to help make the deal work better. I would say that's probably the level that the council wants to get into versus a blanket. Build like crazy, we won't charge you, and no rules. That'll never happen to Lake Oswego, hopefully. So.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, we do have SDC waivers for affordable housing. So it's a specific metric that you have to show that you comply with to get that SDC waiver, but that is in place for any affordable housing.
Affordable housing.
Right.
Any other questions, comments? No? Thank you, Councilor Wendland. We appreciate that update.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, we're going to move into item number 4. This is approving the minutes for April 21st, 2025, a DRC meeting. Do any commissioners have any noted revisions to be made? Hearing none, will someone please make a motion to approve?
I make a motion, we approve the minutes to April, was it, what date was it?
Excuse me, 21st. Excuse me,
21st.
I'm sorry.
2025.
I'll second that motion.
Denman?
Lindstrom,
Yes.
Leek,
Yes.
Dews,
Yes.
O'Connor,
Yes.
Mino,
Yes.
Sangre,
Yes,
6-0.
Is it one absent? So it'd be 6-0, one absent, correct? With. Okay.
That's a great Evan Boone question. I wish he was here.
I felt him whisper something in my ear. We're missing a commissioner. So we'll move into item number 5. I'm going to turn the mic over to Joanna, please.
Thanks. Johanna Hasty, Planning Manager. And really, I'm just going to briefly introduce Paul Espy. He's an associate planner. You've been with the city for 24 years?
25.
25 years. He is also the Historic Resources Advisory Board Staff Liaison, and I believe you've been in that position for about 12 years.
Yeah.
Correct? Okay. And he's going to introduce our presenters tonight for the historic preservation.
Thanks, Johanna. Chair Lindstrom, members of the DRC, good evening. My name is Paul Espy. I'm the long-range planner and staff coordinator for the Historic Resources Advisory Board. And I have here with me this evening Peter Meijer and Jessica Schmidt of Peter Meijer Architects, who will be leading a discussion on the land use review of historic properties with some discussion about the Secretary of Interior standards and other code standards and treatments that are kind of nuanced in the world of design review of normal buildings and that sort of thing. There's some things that they'd like to point out for you folks to pay attention to. You don't review historic properties very often, so we thought it'd be a good idea to acquaint the DRC with these review criteria. And I also have with me members of the Historic Resources Advisory Board, Jen Wiley, Meg Matsushima, and Robin Kwan. They are here to answer any questions after the presentation that you may have about the program or any general questions about historic preservation. And without any further, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you folks.
Thank you, Paul.
It is a pleasure for Jessica and I to be back. We were here in 2017 doing a similar presentation. And it is absolutely terrific that you are open to a refresher on historic preservation, the review criteria of that, which you often don't see come before you. A little bit about PMA. We are specialists in and essentially focus 100% of our practice on existing buildings, historic properties, and we are routinely asked by jurisdictions to assist their staff in more of the nuanced and complicated applications that come before them. And our role in that is to use those jurisdictions' approval criteria and to look at how the applicant meets those criteria or could meet those criteria, and we will provide that guidance to them, or flat out doesn't meet the criteria. As Jessica is presenting this, you will probably hear the terminology that are standard in the industry in the review of historic properties and the criteria. So if there is anything in the presentation that you'd like us to respond a little deeper on, we're happy to do that at the end of the presentation, if that works. So with that, I will turn it over to our preservation planner, Jessica.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm the preservation planner at PMA. I lead clients through city land use review, Oregon State Historic Preservation Office review, and I've led cities through review of projects on historic homes. So with that, so to start, I'll kind of dive into what a historic resource is, some important aspects of the Lake Oswego Historic Preservation Code, and a discussion on character-defining features. And then I'll dive into that'll set us up for learning about the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation, and I'll throw in some Lake Oswego review criteria into that as well. And then I'll end with some helpful resources for you all. So a historic resource can be a building, structure, object, site, or district. And to be a historic, the building, structure, object, site, or district must be at least 50 years old and hold criterion under National Register Criterion A for important events, B for an important person, C for an important piece of architecture or method of construction, or D, which is archaeological importance. The historic resource must also have integrity. So integrity is a property's ability to convey its historic associations and significance through 7 aspects, which are location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. And this kind of goes hand in hand with the Secretary of Interior Standard Number 2 and the Lake Oswego Additional Standard Number 2, which is integrity. So, and it reads, historic integrity of the property shall be retained and preserved. The removal of historic materials or alteration of features and spaces that characterize a property shall be avoided. So on the screen, the 2 images, the image on the top is the Fried Durkenheimer House, and the image on the bottom is the Buckler Henry House, both in Portland proper. The Durkenheimer House has been moved, and it lacks integrity in location and setting. This property also changed use and went through a large rehabilitation project. So there could also most likely be some exterior materials and workmanship that are not original to the house, like any ADA improvements. And the Buckler Henry House has remained in the same place in which it was built, So the Buckler Henry House has more integrity than the Fred Durkheimer House. Some Lake Oswego Historic Preservation Code purposes that I'd like to point out that really go hand in hand with reviewing historic properties are the purpose is to promote the historic, educational, architectural, cultural, economic, and general welfare of the public, foster community and neighborhood pride and a sense of identity, strengthen the economy of the city, enhance property values and increase economic and financial benefits, and protect private property owners against extraordinary costs occasioned by the application of this chapter. I'd also like to point out that interior changes are not regulated by city code, only exterior changes. So within the Lake Oswego Historic Preservation Code, the interests of the individual and the interests of the community are weighted differently. So the code clearly describes that community interests should outweigh the individual interests. That doesn't mean that any owner, like the code says, should be stuck with excessive costs associated with a rehabilitation, but the DRC would have to weigh the impact of what the owner wants to do with the resource. So to make it simple, what does the owner want to do versus how will this change impact the community? And the last item I want to touch on before diving into the Secretary of Interior standards is a building's character-defining features. So to begin, it is the tangible elements of a building that allow a property to be recognized as a physical record of its time, place, and use. And these tangible elements are the character-defining features of a building's style. The character-defining features are all visual aspects and physical features that comprise the appearance of a historic building, including its overall shape, its materials, craftsmanship, decorative details, and aspects of its site and environment. Each architectural style has its distinctive character-defining elements that make it unique. And if these character-defining features are not recognized and preserved, their removal will damage the essential aspects of the building's character, significance, and integrity. So on this screen, you'll see a visual describing the most basic character-defining features on a craftsman and minimal traditional house, including the overall form of the house, the roof and porch shape, and basic decorative details, just for an example. Okay, so diving into some Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation, we'll start with time period consistency. And I'll also reference similar Lake Oswego Review Code and other Secretary of Interior standards as I go on. So time period consistency reads as each property shall be recognized as a physical record of its time, place, and use. Changes that create a false sense of historical development, such as adding conjectural features or architectural elements from other buildings, shall not be undertaken. So on this screen is a historic home of Tudor Revival style. On the left is the primary or front elevation, and on the right is the rear elevation with the existing building on top and the proposed changes on the bottom. The blue dots call out some of the character-defining features of the primary and rear elevations. And the proposed changes included demolishing the garage extension and building a new garage extension that is larger and a better fit for the needs of the family. But the main body of the home will remain unchanged. So although this new garage extension proposed to demolish original material to the house, the project was approved because the proposed garage is to be in the same architectural style and use similar materials and proportions to that of the historic. Larger changes were proposed to the rear of the garage extension And these were approved because they do not detract from the primary elevation character-defining features. So typically, the primary elevation is the most important elevation to keep intact compared to the sides or rear of the house. So in short, identify the most character-defining elements that are important in defining the building's historic character, retain those features to preserve the building's integrity, and refrain from adding features to buildings that reflect a different time period or architectural style. So similar like Oswego review criteria that can also follow the basic principles of this standard are number 4, rehabilitation work, number 6, window replacement, and number 7, signs, lighting, landscaping, and fences. Moving on to distinctive architectural features, and this reads as distinctive features, finishes, and construction techniques or examples of craftsmanship that characterize a property shall be preserved. So similar to the previous slides, distinctive features, finishes, and construction techniques of a building are examples of character-defining features. Overall, changing or removing character-defining features of a building and property should be avoided. The owner of the home shown on the screen wanted to change the primary entrance column and window design of all the windows on the primary elevation. Because these elements are distinctive features that feature distinctive finishes and construction techniques, also known as character-defining features, this design proposal had to be changed to retain these elements before approval. There were also other proposed changes to the home, including wings on either side and rear of the home, as shown in the image on the right. But this proposal was approved after the historic primary elevation and its character-defining features would remain intact. So in short, at the most basic level, ensure that the character-defining features of the primary elevation remain intact. And similar like Oswego review criteria is number 5, window restoration. And the last standard that I'll dive deep into is new additions, which reads, new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. The new work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment. So the goal of any new addition on a historic resource should be to retain a majority of the historic resource, not to overpower the historic resource, and if the addition were to be removed in the future, the form and integrity of the property and its environment would be unimpaired, which is Secretary of Interior Standard number 10 on reversibility. So on the screen, you'll see Portland Fire Station number 28 with its new addition on the right side of the image, and the Mercy Corps headquarters addition on the right side of the screen. Both additions retain a majority of the historic resource and do not destroy all the historic materials that characterize the property, but allow the property to have a successful new or continued use, prolonging its lifespan. Each addition complements the style, design, massing, scale, and other architectural features of the historic resource without overpowering it with modern architecture. Overall, compatibility should be a stronger factor in the design than differentiation. So similar Secretary of Interior standard, like I said before, is that reversibility standard. And then similar like Oswego review criteria is number 1, building height, number 2, horizontal additions, and number 3, roof form. And then the last few Secretary of Interior standards are retention of original construction, which if a property will no longer be used for the same purpose in which it was built, any changes will minimally affect its character-defining features. appropriate treatments. So any treatments or cleaning needs to be completed in a way that will not harm the building. So complete research to see how chemicals react with materials and how effective different cleaning treatments are, and always test in a small, inconspicuous area. And archaeology, which is to protect and preserve archaeology resources and establish mitigation if disturbed. And this standard also has a strong legal requirement and with enforcement and repercussions. So just to wrap it all up, here are several in-print and online resources that I find really helpful for identifying architectural styles and character-defining features. And the Secretary of the Interior Standards, the first resource that I listed, is really helpful for reviewing projects. It gives a lot of great examples of how you can apply the standards. And that is all. Thank you.
It was amazing. Thank you. Go ahead.
I have a couple questions. I guess I'm not clear. To whom does this structure apply? Someone who comes in to make an application for changing a home? Or are these homes already designated historical on the historic register? I mean, help me here.
I can actually respond to that.
Yeah.
So Paul can provide some actual numbers, but we have homes that have been designated historic landmarks. And when you purchase them, that is one of the things that you're purchasing. So if you were to do any alterations besides interior, obviously you would have to get building permits for the interior, but anything for the exterior, then that is when you have to go through a land use application process, starting with a pre-application conference, and then we have Paul liaise with the Historic Resources Advisory Board to provide feedback. And then that's when those standards, whether it's a minor alteration, a major alteration, an addition, something like that, or a detached accessory structure, that's when these standards, both the Lake Oswego Historic Preservation Standards as well as the Secretary of Interior Standards apply.
But it's on a house that's already designated on the
It
historic
is.
register. Because I come from a town in New Jersey where 90% of the homes, carte blanche, are all on the historic register.
Yeah, so we have maybe
very few of them. We have 73 objects, and I think about 30 of which are actual historic homes. So there's very few, and so we would like to try to take as good a care of them as we possibly can.
What if one isn't on the historic register and they do come in to do something major? Are they encouraged not to? I mean,
They would just be subject to our code criteria regarding normal single-family dwellings.
okay, thank you.
So since one of the criteria is the 50-year, at least 50 years. So it seems like there would be the potential of new homes that have passed that 50-year period.
absolutely.
How is that process?
They would only be designated with the written permission of the property owner. And one of the things that we do to initiate that process is to do what's called a reconnaissance level survey of various neighborhoods. And primarily, that's really just done to inventory all of the older homes that are still extant and in good condition as an inventory in case, they do change over time. We have a good historic record of what those homes actually looked like at the time we did the surveys. Every once in a while, we get a few people that rise up and give us a call and are interested in, they love their house, they want to have it remain, and they're interested in designating the property. And so we enter them into that process and assist them as much as we can to.
And
Yeah, that kind of rolls into another question that I had when you said good condition. So you have a house that is on the historic register, and you need to keep it in good condition, but what if you do not have the finances to do so? Is there aid provided?
We have a program here in the city. It's a historic preservation grant that provides up to $5,000 for any historic renovations to the building if you are on the city's list.
5,000?
Up to 5,000, correct.
That's not going to do much.
Yeah. It's a fairly good amount of seed money to, we've worked with several people that there was one person who wanted to restore all of her windows, and she came back to the wells for several years and got all of her windows restored and had significant price reduction for. She still had to pay, a certain amount of money because it's
Yes.
not cheap to get those windows restored, but the grant definitely helped her
It's not a
achieve that.
one-time grant.
No, you can go back as many times as you want. It is competitive. And so if there's somebody in the mix that hasn't applied for a grant before, then more priority would be given to that person who hasn't applied before. But it just really depends. It depends upon the merit of the project and, just the property, the significance of the house, all sorts of factors enter in and get reviewed by the Historic Resources Advisory Board. And the funding gets distributed based on the number of people that apply and the type of project that they're doing.
Can you talk about possible tax incentives or abatements for historic resources, historic landmarks?
So there is, through the state, I believe there is a special assessment that you can have, but you would need to be on the National Register of Historic Properties, and you would need to provide a preservation plan in order to do that.
So not just the local list?
No, I don't think there's any local programs to do tax abatement. It's more of a state level, and you would be partnering with the State Historic Preservation Office to have that done. And correct me when I'm wrong, we haven't really worked with too many tax abatement incentive programs lately, so it's.
So you are referring to the special assessment, which is a property tax abatement.
Right.
And it is currently under review by the legislature, and they have not yet made a determination whether or not that program will be renewed.
No.
So it did sunset,
Very
and
good,
it
or
is,
not so good.
and
Yeah.
it may not apply to a single-family resident.
I have a question that goes
Yeah.
with your question. Is this why the Palisades area is undergoing this architectural review process? Is this in response, because when I was on the planning commission, we went and had a walking tour of the Palisades neighborhood, and of course, they're all up in arms because a certain builder takes the nice big lot with a little old house and it's gone and builds a modern house, and they don't like that.
So we're taking a systematic approach to various neighborhoods and doing these reconnaissance level surveys. And last year we did a survey for the Lake Grove neighborhood. We surveyed approximately 150 to 200 properties, and of that we came up with about 30 or 40 that were in good condition. We have set our sights on the McVeigh, South Shore, and Hallidan neighborhoods to see if there are any properties there. We will survey them all. Or we won't survey every single property within the neighborhood, but we will go out and take a look at some of the better or the properties that are in better shape and do what is called a selective reconnaissance level survey, so that we don't have to, be overburdened with, the hundreds of properties that are out there that may not be in very good shape. But we will kind of do a focused analysis on the properties that we feel are in good shape, and we'll have members of the Historic Resources Advisory Board go out in various sectors of those areas and pick out some of those and compile a list to provide to the consultant, who will do a little bit of a deeper dive. But really the reconnaissance level survey is just what it says it is. It's a very 30,000 foot view of the house, and there's a few photographs that are taken, and if there is some architectural background, that's reported, but very little as compared to what is known as an intensive level survey, which is the next step for any property that would want to designate and be on the city's landmark designation list.
And so once you have all this information, then what?
Well, the State Historic Preservation Office provides us with grant money to do this because they are very interested, as we are, for providing an inventory of these properties for the historic record. We recognize, and SHPO recognizes, that neighborhoods and properties change over time with remodel. There could be a fire, there could be an earthquake, there could be anything. And it's really important to have a historic record of the properties that were in place at the time the survey was done.
They could also become middle housing.
True.
Yeah, I have a question about process. If a proposal comes to the Historical Resources Advisory Committee and their consultants, they have expertise which we hope would allow a project to be evaluated, to whatever the appropriate standard is. And if there is no contention between the potential developer or whomever and the committee, we're unlikely to see that project. But we will see a project that is in contention. And if it is in contention, I'm pleased to have two architectural colleagues whose expertise, I'm sure, will help to evaluate those contentious elements. But we hear over and over the clear and objective standard phraseology used with respect to projects that we more routinely see. What are the clear and objective standards that the committee and their consultants are able to apply, and how can they help us to understand the clear and objective standards if we have to make a contentious decision?
So historic landmarks are not subject to the same level of clear and objective standards as new construction. So we can set that aside. They are subject to a discretionary review. That's why it is a certain amount of alteration is subject to, there's exempt, there's repair and maintenance, and then there are minor alterations and there are major alterations. Once you get past repair and maintenance, then you are in the discretionary review. It is subject to a land use application. So you can set aside the clear and objective aspect that you have to deal with a lot with other types of housing. But the Historic Resources Advisory Board, like I said, weighs in early in the process. They provide written feedback and analysis of the proposed plans at the preliminary level pre-application. They work with an applicant. A lot of times they go out in the field multiple times and they talk to the property owner, they talk to the designer, the architect, whoever is involved. If it is contentious or if there is a way to alter it in order to preserve the historic integrity, then they try to get to that before the land use application is actually submitted. So once it gets submitted, then we have staff and we have ATRAB as well to offer guidance as we go through, as staff goes through the analysis. And again, we don't have contentious ones all that often. There's been a couple that I've had to work through, and ATRAB has been an invaluable member in that discussion. But it does come to you, and it's a balance of whether or not the alteration preserves the historic integrity according to the Historic Preservation Code, or through an EC analysis, and that's economic, social, environmental, and
Energy
analysis, that the proposed changes out. Help me on this one, Paul. Oh, wait, let me just try it. That the benefits of the proposed changes when looking at those goals outweighs preserving it as is. And so if you can show that the historic integrity is not lost, and through all of these criteria that they've gone through tonight, then we could probably support it. Of course, that's a discretionary finding, but if the historic integrity is lost, you can go through this EC analysis and basically see if the benefits of allowing the change outweigh the benefits of keeping it as is. So there's two paths there. Again, not clear and objective at all, very discretionary, but an open process where people do get to participate and weigh in and hopefully come to a good conclusion.
So hypothetical, if a adversarial issue came in front of us, we would have a committee that made an enlightened recommendation. We would have consultants who had very professional standard application. We have staff who are knowledgeable. But the other side is most likely going to have other consultants who are arguing their point. And it seems to me that we are faced with the dilemma of our potentially subjective interpretation of this kind of guidance that the codes and standards apply. Is that a fair statement?
It is, but I don't know that it's necessarily any better or worse than design review for, say, a multifamily residential in a design district.
Yeah, that's why we have the architects.
Right. And we always rely on the code, you know, at the very baseline for any review or analysis of those properties, historic or otherwise.
I would say that the code criteria for historic landmarks are extremely detailed, and they break it down into, as Jessica, right? Thank you, I'm sorry. As she broke it down in the presentation, it gets down to the window patterns, the cladding, you know, it's very specific. So as far as what the details are, we have the cultural resources inventory for that particular house. It goes into detail of why it's historic, what the character defining elements are or features are. We have the history of the home, we have landscaping, site improvements, anything like that. And then we have the code that goes through and says, okay, well, what are you proposing? How is it being changed from this original character defining features, the overall shape of it, the overall look of it, and the finer details. So as far as what criteria you have, it's actually it's quite a bit more explicit with historic landmarks. And so it gives you, I think, although it's very discretionary, a more hooks to hang your decision on, if that makes sense.
Thanks very much. Appreciate that.
Yeah, quick question. You mentioned that with a historic property, take a home here in the city, that it requires the property owner to agree to going on to that list. If later on that owner, or say a new owner, didn't want to continue that, is there a process for delisting?
Yes, there is. There's kind of two pathways that you can do. There was the Demlo case based on properties that were done way back in the past that may have been designated against the will of the property owner, can actually have them reviewed by letter, but there aren't very many, or if any, in the city of Lake Oswego that are in that category anymore. But we do have a process in the code that is reviewed by the Historic Resources Advisory Board that analyzes the merits of removal of the historic property.
And Paul, that is from your local code.
Correct.
Once a property owner, whether it's a current one or previous, had their property placed on the National Register of Historic Places, then unless there's a catastrophic event, fire, complete demolition, those properties, there is not a process to delist it.
Right, I understood that, yeah.
And you might recall that when owner's consent came within the state of Oregon, then these are the processes that Paul just described very early on. Hey, this was over my, I did not consent to this. So that really played out in the first couple of years after that. And so it has stabilized now where Paul mentioned if it's a new property that has just turned 50, that requires owner consent now. But then that owner's consent does carry forth, again, if it's on the National Register, will carry forth, for as far as we know, each local jurisdiction, Lake Oswego included, has a different way of coming in and off.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Is it possible that we could get a copy or an electronic copy of the presentation?
It's a public record, so I think you have it, yes. Yes.
I'm not sure what the size of the
we will
PDF is.
I think it's recorded on YouTube, and I think. Yeah, and
The PDF.
I'm not sure, Peter, you'll probably provide us with a PDF copy of
Yeah,
the
happy to.
PowerPoint?
I think we have that,
Happy
yeah.
to.
Great.
So we can post it on the meeting webpage as a PDF. This PowerPoint presentation, that'll include this slide with all these
Okay.
helpful links.
Yeah,
Yeah, great.
I think just to emphasize that in all likelihood, these homes have been altered over time, and that if you do get a current applicant, they love the house, they bought the house, they would like to typically invest in the house, and you're going to be asked to balance out. You will say to the applicant, well, you knew when you bought it, it was a really important property in the history of Lake Oswego. We have seen, and Jessica's examples showed that there were quite large changes made to those, but it came down to what was the core elements, primary facade that you will consider and balance in the expertise that they bring and the expertise that you will hear from within. So, and I will say there's 99.9% there's a way forward, and you're working with the applicant.
I have one more question. So you do your survey, you do your analysis, you come up with the list in this particular neighborhood of which are significant homes to maintain or to keep an eye on. Do you let the homeowners know that they have been designated as special on this list?
So before we do the survey, we send a notice to all the property owners that we're going to be doing the survey, and then we give a pretty good description of what that survey entails. And basically, all it is a set of papers that talk about or document the architectural characteristics of the house and any historic significance that it may have. And that's it.
Yeah, they don't actually get designated without the property. The whole designation process
Yeah,
is
they
a
aren't
formal
required to
process.
do anything. They're not designated other than the fact that they're, on a public record with us and the State Historic Preservation Office.
Letters.
Do you want to join us? We can't, with the mic, we can't hear you.
We do. Yeah, we send out notice to the property owners before the survey is done.
But after.
But after the survey?
We do send, yes, and after we send out letters to ask if they would like to designate the property.
And this applies to commercial buildings as well?
Yes, any buildings that are over 50 years old, correct.
The Hunt Club, for example, and I think that was in Jessica's presentation, that was designated historic landmark.
Yeah, and we've got a few buildings down on the end of Highway 43 over past B, over near
I
the,
was just thinking the Mountain Park Clubhouse is over 50 years old and has been obviously a unique focal point for a community of 8,500 people.
right. We will systematically go through all of the older neighborhoods first, and then we will, make our way around the mountain park at some point in the future.
It's all in the eye of the architect.
It's very discretionary, right? Design is subjective.
I have one question. Do you have any more questions? Any more questions? I was just waiting for you all to finish. It can be yes or no, but I just feel it should be stated as a question and on public record. So just a quick example. So a house is 2 years away from being able to submit an application for approval. But that person's health, medical, getting forced out of a neighborhood because it's getting overdeveloped. This is happening all over Portland. It's happening in these other neighborhoods, Sellwood, anywhere you can think of, this is happening. So is there any not-for-profits that can help draft a covenant, that a covenant's in place that the new buyer cannot do any demolition to the property itself, to the main structure, until that property goes through a formal approval process? And then if it's rejected, tear down, have at her. But say that person's on their deathbed, I hate to sell this property, but I have to. I'd hate for this house to get demoed. I raised my family. I mean, because it's kind of I'm just trying to think of people that can't do anything but sell.
Right, so there are nonprofits that are around that will do what is called a preservation easement. And easements can be drawn up under a variety of different circumstances, one of which could be to preserve the house for a certain number of years or in perpetuity while that person owns it and after the person sells it.
That would not be something that the city of Lake Oswego would enforce, though. That would be
Right.
a private
a
issue.
civil-
Yeah, no,
Civil issue.
absolutely. That was just if there was any not-for-profits or nonprofits that you can think of that help with.
And of course, that would
cases
be
like that.
entirely up to the property owner to coordinate with that nonprofit to develop that easement for that conservation easement or preservation easement for that particular
Well,
property.
do they exist?
They do.
They do? Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And again, we've actually seen, I don't know that we have a preservation, I've ever seen a preservation easement, but we've seen plat notes or plat restrictions or CCNRs that go above and beyond what the code requires. And it's always an interesting situation to be the planning authority and say, yes, you have approval to do X, Y, and Z, but then there is some sort of civil or plat note or restriction on the property itself that doesn't allow them to. So it's not something we see all that often, definitely not part of the historic preservation code, but yeah, possibility. And I'm not sure if you want more information on that, because Paul might be able to forward you nonprofits, do you know?
I believe that the Architectural Heritage Foundation does it, and then there is another one.
Or Oregon?
Historic
for
Oregon?
Yeah, we'll do it.
That's perfect right there, just so I could hear it on record, and now it's recorded for public to reference. Thank you. Does anybody else have anything?
I have a couple questions.
Yep.
So with the historic properties, are there any guidelines as to, or requirements as to whether you need to keep the original use of the property the same, or like, are you open to, like adaptive reuse, so just completely changing the use of the building as long as you keep the required features the same?
So I believe that the historic preservation standards do talk about preserving the use, that is part of the historic integrity. I know that it's one that you brought up in the Secretary of Interior standards, so.
Actually, I think that we rely pretty much on the base zone for whatever use is allowed, except for the fact that there used to be in the code conditional use permit criteria to allow for some limited office use in residential neighborhoods. There used to be, but
That's a very good code-related question. I wish I was prepared to speak about that. But I would say, like the interior changes are not regulated by our historic preservation code. Adaptive reuse of a building, I think it would depend. And then if there were repercussions to the exterior, obviously that would be regulated. But yeah, the use question, that's a good question. I can get back to you on that.
So as an architect, we can answer that.
Oh, great.
That many of our clients are changing the use, and that use is typically not reviewed by historic code.
Okay.
They're looking at changes to the exterior. So you're adapting the property to the new use. Usually what's you're looking at is much higher triggers, seismic, energy, and all of those that are the determining factor, cost associated. Anything else to that?
No, I think you covered it.
So change of use is common.
But I think that there are a lot, because of those like seismic upgrades, there could be significant changes to the historic integrity, which would maybe keep it from being supported.
So coming from PMA's perspective, those are internal. So we have seen cross braces like this go into and generally the higher level of review is coming from the incentives that they're after. So if they're going after federal historic tax credits incentives, it's the park services that reviewing this. So generally, the local jurisdictions are okay with seeing that cross brace through the windows. Energy these days, so energy is on the inside as well. So as Jessica said, most of the time interior is not reviewed. So all those changes under the right firm, they're able to meet both those, all of those code, as well as the historic review criteria.
Good. And one last question. So if we're focused more on the exterior, preserving, the architectural features is definitely important in most cases. Is there anything in regards to changing the colors of things to something completely different than what it was before? Because I just don't really recall there being anything in regards to color.
So if you think of paint and someone in Peter's personal opinion, it's a garish color, the very next person is going to paint it differently. So many jurisdictions allow flexibility in color. I'm not quite sure what Lake Oswego's.
We have repair and maintain. I think it would depend.
Okay, that's
That's
probably
that's
probably
what
a
you
great,
know.
great answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In some cases, we've had colors approved through the design review process, in which case they would need to go back through that process to have the color changed.
So maybe the question that we're seeing of late is there are true historic materials, if you think of slate, if you think of terracotta, even stones, are quite expensive. So we're starting to see a number of what is an appropriately historic replacement material for that. And they vary widely. If I use the example of slate, Jessica's research said you can find plastic, you can find concrete, you can find ones that you can't really, I think one was an asphaltic shingle, and then you can find ones that unless you were really new, it looks just like slate. So probably more in that initial review are the questions of what is appropriate, and there, like everything, there are probably some very good ones and some less than good ones. So that's probably more the ones that you would see versus a color.
But it is regulated for historic landmarks. So not all of them, but there are some. We have a code violation situation on an historic landmark that was one color and is now something very different, and we're trying to corral.
Thank you.
I'll add another one that's always comes up, and the example that Jessica showed is windows. And I think from our perspective in working for the jurisdictions, we wanted to make sure that the appearance was the highest criteria versus one-for-one replacement. So that if you're on the street looking at the elevation, primary elevation, the appearance of the windows is the same. And that all depends, but that's a big one that you'll more than likely see.
You can always tell when windows are replaced when they are flush with the exterior wall plane. Historic windows are often inset to a certain degree, and they also have a very pronounced mullion definition as well. Then we try to achieve as much parity with that profile as we can.
Well, thank you very much.
Our pleasure.
That was enlightening. Very, very much appreciate that. That was great. We're going to move into item number 6. Do you have any schedule review or management updates you'd like to give?
Thank you. So we don't have any land use applications scheduled. We do, like I said last time, have a couple of land use applications that will be coming to you, but they're not complete yet, and then we haven't got a date for the hearing. I did want to update you on the tree code amendments. That process, we did select a consultant, and that's Cascadia Partners, along with Todd Prager and Associates. They bring a wealth of information and experience helping jurisdictions through an analysis of tree code criteria. and also balancing that with housing development. So we're excited to get started on that process. And then, like Councilor Wendland said, just a plug to get your reappointment submissions in by the 11th and/or the tree code task force requests. And other than that, we are done. So for, I would say the next month, so the second meeting in May and the first meeting in June, likely nothing to be scheduled. But we will have reappointments in the beginning of June at the earliest. No, beginning of July.
Do minutes need to be approved for this meeting?
Yeah, but there's no urgency there since it was just a work session.
So we double up in the next one.
Yeah, probably. We'll get them out to you. We'll at least get them done, probably hold off on reviewing them and bringing them to you until the next actual scheduled hearing.
Great.
But we'll get that presentation posted on. Nice, thank you, Kat.
Well, great. Got to give out show some gratitude here. So I am grateful for that presentation. I know it's late in the evening, and I'm just glad everybody getting involved. I'm sure the commissioners enjoyed it just as much as I did. Great presentation. Thanks, city staff. I want to thank Councilor Wendland for making an appearance tonight, giving us an update. And thank you, Commission, for being a part of the Development Review Commission. And I adjourn this meeting, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Where did you live in New Jersey?
Glen Ridge.
I do watch This Old House.
I watch it religiously. Well,